History rarely announces its turning points. Sometimes it only takes a wrong turn, a forgotten message, or one careless sentence. Here are 8 tiny mistakes that changed everything. Number 1. The wrong turn that helped start a world war. Sarajevo, June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, traveled through the city in an open automobile. Several young conspirators were waiting along the route. Their first attack failed. One attacker threw a bomb at the Archduke's car. The driver accelerated. The bomb bounced away, only exploded in another vehicle. Franz Ferdinand survived. The assassins scattered. The official visit continued. The danger appeared to be over. Later that morning, Franz Ferdinand decided to visit the officers injured in the bombing. The motorcade's route was changed, but the new instructions were not properly communicated to every driver. The Archduke's car turned onto the wrong street. An officer immediately shouted that the driver had made a mistake. The vehicle stopped. It then began reversing. Standing only a few steps away was Gavrilo Princip, one of the conspirators who had failed to reach the Archduke earlier. Princip raised his pistol and fired twice. One bullet struck Franz Ferdinand. The other struck his wife, Sophie. Both died. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. An ultimatum followed. Russia mobilized. Germany declared war. France and Britain entered the conflict. Within weeks, much of Europe was at war. The First World War killed millions, destroyed empires, and prepared the ground for revolutions, dictatorships, and another global conflict. The wrong turn did not create Europe's rival alliances or political tensions. Those had existed for years. It simply placed a loaded pistol beside the final spark. The driver corrected his route. History did not. Number 2. The ice warning that never reached the bridge the North Atlantic. April 14, 1912, the Titanic was sailing west toward New York. Throughout the day, nearby ships transmitted warnings about ice. Some reached the bridge. Others were handled among the enormous volume of wireless traffic passing through the ship. At 9:40 that evening, the steamship Mesaba sent a detailed message. It reported heavy pack ice, field ice, and many large icebergs directly ahead of Titanic's route. The wireless operator received the warning, but the message was never delivered to Captain Edward Smith or the officers on the bridge. The operator was working through a backlog of passenger telegrams. These private messages were part of the commercial service provided aboard the ship. The ice report was set aside. Titanic continued at high speed through a calm, moonless night. The calm water made the danger harder to see. Waves normally broke against the base of an iceberg, producing a pale outline. That night, the sea was nearly flat. At 11:40, the lookout spotted an iceberg ahead. The warning came too late. The ship turned, but its starboard side scraped along the ice. Seawater entered a series of compartments that the vessel had not been designed to lose simultaneously. Titanic sank in the early hours of April 15. More than 500 people died. No single mistake caused the disaster. The ship carried too few lifeboats. Its speed remained high. The night concealed the ice. Its compartment design could not survive the pattern of flooding, yet the official British inquiry concluded that the Mesaba warning described ice in Titanic's immediate vicinity. Had it reached the bridge, it might have changed the ship's navigation. The message crossed the ocean. It failed to cross the ship. Number 3. The contaminated dish that changed medicine. London, 1928. Alexander Fleming was studying Staphylococcus bacteria at St. Mary's Hospital. His laboratory was not famous for perfect order. Before leaving on holiday, Fleming left several culture plates behind. When he returned, he began examining them before throwing them away. One dish had been contaminated by mold. For most researchers, contamination meant failure. The experiment was ruined. The plate belonged in the waste container. Fleming looked more closely. Around the mold was a clear zone. The bacteria near it had been destroyed. The mold was producing a substance that prevented bacterial growth. Fleming eventually called that substance penicillin. The observation did not immediately transform medicine. Fleming struggled to isolate and stabilize the active material. His early work attracted limited attention, and penicillin remained a laboratory curiosity for years. More than a decade later, Howard Florey, Ernst Chain, Norman Heatley, and their colleagues at Oxford developed methods to extract, test, and produce it. Wartime research then pushed penicillin toward mass production. Before antibiotics, a small cut could become fatal. Pneumonia, blood poisoning, and infected wounds killed patients that modern hospitals might save routinely. Penicillin changed that calculation. It helped transform surgery, battlefield medicine, and the treatment of bacterial disease. The discovery is often described as luck, but mold had contaminated laboratory samples before. What mattered was that Fleming did not simply discard the evidence of failure. The careless plate created the opportunity. A careful observation created the discovery. Number 4. The delayed reports at Midway, the Pacific Ocean. June 1942, 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan prepared an operation against Midway Atoll. The plan was designed to draw American aircraft carriers into an ambush and destroy them, but American codebreakers had uncovered much of the plan. The United States positioned its carriers northeast of Midway and waited. On June 4th, reconnaissance aircraft searched thousands of square miles of ocean. Reports arrived late, incomplete or not at all. Some contact reports took hours to move through communication channels. Pilots launched with uncertain information. Squadrons flew in different directions. Several American aircraft nearly exhausted their fuel searching for Japanese ships. Confusion filled the sky. The Japanese commanders faced their own information problems. Their aircraft had attacked Midway, but American land-based planes were still operating. Reserve aircraft aboard the Japanese carriers were prepared with torpedoes used against ships. Then came a request for another strike against Midway. Weapons and fuel lines crowded the hangar decks as crews changed equipment. A late reconnaissance report finally confirmed the presence of American naval forces. The Japanese now needed anti-ship weapons again. Oars changed. Time disappeared. At approximately 10:20 in the morning, American dive bombers arrived above the Japanese carrier force. Japanese fighters were flying at lower altitude after attacking American torpedo planes. The carriers were vulnerable. Within minutes, bombs crippled Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. Hiryu was destroyed later. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers. The United States lost Yorktown. Midway did not end the Pacific War, but it permanently damaged Japan's carrier striking force and shifted the strategic balance. The battle involved intelligence, courage, training, and chance. It cannot be reduced to one delayed message or one changed order. But carrier warfare operated in minutes. Information that arrived late was almost the same as information that never arrived. The ocean was enormous. The margin was not. Number 5. The missing instruction that destroyed Mariner 1 Cape Canaveral. July 22, 1962. Mariner 1 was meant to become the first American spacecraft to fly past Venus. The launch began normally. Soon, however, the Atlas rocket started drifting away from its intended course. The guidance system attempted to correct it. Instead, the rocket received faulty steering commands. Its movements became increasingly dangerous. Less than 5 minutes after launch, the range safety officer faced a simple calculation. The malfunctioning vehicle could threaten populated areas or shipping lanes. He transmitted the destruction command. The rocket exploded over the Atlantic. Mariner 1 disappeared with it. For decades, the failure was commonly blamed on a missing hyphen in the computer code. That explanation is not accurate. NASA's later historical account described 2 connected problems. A guidance antenna performed poorly, forcing the system to depend on an internal guidance program. That program contained an error created when a handwritten mathematical notation was transferred incorrectly into computer instructions. A smoothing function was omitted. Without it, ordinary variations in velocity data were treated as real course changes. The system commanded unnecessary corrections and sent the rocket off course. The spacecraft cost millions of dollars. The critical mistake was a tiny missing element in a technical expression. Mariner 1 became a warning repeated across engineering departments for generations. Complex machines do not understand intention. They obey what was written. Number 6. 2 words that opened the Berlin Wall. East Berlin. November 9, 1989. The East German government was under pressure. Mass protests were growing. Thousands of citizens were leaving the country through neighboring states. Communist governments across Eastern Europe were weakening. Officials prepared new travel regulations intended to reduce the crisis. Günter Schabowski, a senior East German official, was given a note describing the policy shortly before a televised press conference. He had not fully reviewed the details. Near the end of the conference, Schabowski announced that citizens would be allowed to travel through border crossings. A journalist asked when the regulation would take effect. Schabowski searched through his papers. The government had not prepared the border guards to open the checkpoints that evening. But Schabowski answered that, as far as he knew, the rule applied immediately, without delay. News organizations reported that East Germany had opened its borders. Crowds began gathering at checkpoints across Berlin. The guards had no clear orders. At Bornholmer Strasse, the pressure grew by the minute. Thousands demanded passage. Officers telephoned their superiors but received no workable solution. Late that evening, the commander at the checkpoint raised the barrier. People crossed into West Berlin. Other checkpoints followed. Citizens climbed onto the wall, embraced strangers, and struck the concrete with hammers. The East German states did not collapse because of two words. Its economy, political authority, and control over its population had already been eroding. But those words changed the speed of events. The government planned a controlled adjustment. The television audience heard an open border. Number 7. The unit error that sent a spacecraft into Mars September 1999. NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter approached Mars after traveling through space for more than 9 months. The spacecraft was designed to study the Martian atmosphere and serve as a communications relay for another mission. Its final trajectory depended on precise calculations. One engineering team produced data using pound-for-seconds, an English unit. The navigation software expected Newton seconds, a metric unit. The values were transferred without proper conversion. For months, each small navigation calculation pushed the predicted position away from the spacecraft's actual path. Engineers noticed inconsistencies during the mission, but the underlying cause was not identified in time. When Mars Climate Orbiter reached the planet, it passed much lower than planned. Communication was lost, the spacecraft likely entered the atmosphere too deeply and was destroyed or thrown back into space. The mission cost approximately $125 million before launch expenses. The hardware had crossed tens of millions of miles. The failure began with two teams expressing the same physical force in different languages of measurement. The investigation found more than a single mathematical error. Communication procedures, testing, and management controls had also failed to catch it. The numbers were accurate. Their meaning was not number 8. The ballot design that helped decide a presidency Florida, November 7, 2000, the American presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore came down to one state, Florida. The official margin was only hundreds of votes. In Palm Beach County, voters received an unusual punch card ballot. Candidate names appeared on facing pages, while the holes used to select them ran down the center. The design became known as the butterfly ballot. Its layout confused many voters. Some punched the hole beside the wrong candidate. Others selected more than one candidate, invalidating their presidential vote. A particularly unusual number of ballots in the heavily Democratic county recorded votes for minor party candidate Pat Buchanan. Thousands of additional ballots contained multiple presidential selections or incomplete punches. The disputed count triggered recounts, lawsuits, and a decision by the United States Supreme Court that stopped the recount process. Bush won Florida's certified result by 537 votes and therefore won the presidency through the Electoral College. The butterfly ballot was not the only problem. Different counties used different voting machines. Punch card systems produced partially detached pieces of paper. Voter lists contained errors. Polling resources were unevenly distributed. Standards for evaluating ballots varied. The United States Commission on Civil Rights later found substantial voter confusion and serious failures across Florida. No responsible account can prove that one badly arranged page alone determined everything that followed. But the design error existed inside an election decided by a margin smaller than a crowded theater. The consequences extended far beyond Florida. The next administration shaped tax policy, environmental regulation, and the federal courts. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, it launched wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. A ballot is supposed to record a decision. In Palm Beach County, the ballot became part of the decision. Conclusion: these events were not caused by mistakes alone. Europe was already unstable before Sarajevo. Titanic had multiple safety failures. Penicillin required years of additional research. East Germany was already collapsing. Florida's election involved far more than one confusing ballot. History is a chain. Large forces create the tension. Governments, armies, technologies, and institutions pull that chain tighter. Then someone turns down the wrong street. Someone leaves a message on a desk. Someone copies a symbol incorrectly. Someone uses pounds instead of newtons. Someone says immediately. The action may last only seconds. The consequences may last for generations. History is often described as the work of powerful rulers and enormous armies. Sometimes, it is rewritten by a detail small enough to overlook.